Hello and welcome to this video on SQEELS. SQEELS links into one of the things that we do a lot in English. In English, there are three different types of writing. There's fiction writing, which is you're writing your poems and your short stories. Non-fiction writing, which is newspapers, magazine articles. And then there's a third style of writing, which is analysis, which is about writing about texts. Now in English, we have a lot of text that we read to help us understand as readers, but also to help us understand as writers. So a lot of the time we do is we look at a text, whether it be a poem or an article or a newspaper or a bit from a novel, and we look at it and we talk about why the writer made those choices. Now one of the problems is that often students, when they're talking about a text, they become too focused about the story or what's going on in the text. And we use this analysis type of writing and talking to help us make sure we talk about the right things. And that's where SQEELS helps us, because it directs us to talk about the things that we need to be talking about and not just the story. You'll get higher marks by talking about the SQEEL things than you will do by just talking about the story. Now before we carry on, we need to make a very clear thing, is that we're not using the word squeals as in the sound that pigs make. All right, we're using SQEELS in a different way as an acronym, which is letters which represent a word. So SQEEL. Okay, let's look at what each of these letters represent. So the first one, the S, is spot it. The Q is for quote it. The E is for effect. The second one is for explain. L is for linking. And S is for symbolize. Now these are all skills that we want you to be talking about when writing about poems, novels, any article that we do. These are the sort of things that you should be doing when talking about things, but also the things that you should be doing when writing about things in English. And we're going to take you through what each element means and the skills associated with it. So the first thing we're going to do is the spot it. The spot it's quite easy because it's you using techniques and terminology. So what has the writer used to show us how this character is scary or to show us that this character is sad? So we've got simile, verb, adjective. So what you're looking for is the easy, quick things. So this is something that students sometimes forget, but it's something that we need you to talk about. So what has the writer used? So there we go, spot it. The next thing is quote it. So you've spotted a simile. Well, we now need you to give me an example of that simile. So, and we use single inverted commas, and you can see we've got an example here. So the writer used the simile like a ghost. The writer used the verb whispered. The writer used the adjective thin. Now, just as a word of note is that quotation is the term that we use to describe this. This is a quotation, okay? So that's what we refer to as a quotation. And a quotation is simply a bit from the text. So you've taken a bit out of the text and you've put it in your writing. That's what a quote is. Effect. Now this is where it starts getting tricky because most of us can spot a technique, we can give a quotation, but then it moves on to something a little bit more tricky, and that's the effect of it. So this is when we're talking about text and we're saying how it makes us feel. Now a little bit of a tip could be that either think about, does it make us feel, is it a negative or is it a positive kind of effect? And if you look at like a ghost, you know, ghosts aren't meant to be very positive things, are they? Because it's quite a negative mood. So in this, it could show us that's quite negative. but also it might, if we know the rest of the story, might tell us a bit more. So it might make us imagine how this person feels, or it might create a sense of loss. So the effect is how the reader feels, and that's putting it into a phrase and explaining. Now the next bit is the explanation, and this is something that students often forget to do, but it's a really important thing. And this is kind of like a mixture of skills, but this is one of the big things, and it's kind of like why does the writer do this? And that's explaining. So why does the writer want us to see how lonely this person is and the sense of loss? And here we've got, it's because Tom has been abandoned by his friends. The writer wants us to understand that Tom doesn't feel real anymore. He feels like a ghost because ghosts can't touch or feel things. So all this is the student explaining why he feels lonely. Okay, and it's because he's been abandoned by his friends. And you can see there's quite a bit of explanation there. So you need to give a reason, and always make sure, and this is one of the things that students forget to do, is to give a reason. Why does this happen? Why do we feel sad? Why is it negative? Well, it's negative because Tom has been abandoned by his friends. So let's explain it. Now link it is fairly quite straightforward. What you're going to do with link it is link to another part in the text. So here, all this linking bit links to another bit in the text where this boy called Tom, who feels like a ghost because his friends have abandoned him, he doesn't feel like he's alive anymore. And then the writer uses phrases like crouching and hunched up, and it gives the idea that he's kind of hiding away from everybody. He doesn't want to be noticed, he wants to be invisible. And so what linking is linking to something else in the text to prove your idea and prove your reason that you've got here. So this is our reason, and this kind of backs up our reason because it also shows us when this is going on. And the last thing is symbolizing. Now, we know that all the time people use symbols to mean something else. And so what this does here is it puts in a big idea about the text. So this could be a symbol of how people are becoming more detached from one another. And so we've got this idea of something from the wider world that kind of helps us understand what's going on here. So it's really something outside the text. Now, symbols can be anything. So it can be a symbol to do with religion. It could be a symbol to do with Greek myths. It could be a symbol from another story. But symbols are there, and it's showing what's really going on in the text. And actually, it shows a bit of your knowledge that you're making a connection with this thing in the text to something else. Let's do a quick quiz then. So what do the different letters represent then? So just quickly pause the video and decide which letter responds to which skill. Okay, hopefully that should be time enough for you. Okay, so what are we doing? So the S is for spotting. The Q is for your quote. Your E, the first one, is for your effect. Your next one is for explaining. The next one is for linking. And then finally, it's for your symbols. So these are things that you need to do and what we're looking for when talking about texts. Now, let's make it really clear. What are we doing at each of these different skills? Because these are skills that we want to see in your writing when talking about texts. So, spot it. What has the writer used? So, techniques, words, phrases. Quote, what's your evidence for this? What is the reader supposed to feel? What's the effect? Is it a positive or negative feeling that the reader is supposed to have? Explain it. What is the writer trying to make the reader understand? Now, these two questions are very closely linked together. We feel this because the writer wants us to understand this. To make us understand this, the writer makes us feel this. So those two are closely linked together. Link it. What else has the writer used to show us this idea? And then finally, symbolize it. What big idea or thing could this be a symbol of? Now, these are the skills, and they can feature at any time in a paragraph when writing analysis in English. Now, obviously, you could start in this particular order, but you don't have to. Okay, these are the skills that we will expect to see. And what we tend to do when writing a paragraph and getting students to do this is to tick off. So in your paragraph, have you used a quotation? Have you used technical terms? Have you talked about the effect on the reader? Have you explained what the writer is trying to do? Have you linked it to other parts in the text? And have you talked about the symbols of the text? All these things help you become better writers about texts. Now, to help you show these skills, we're going to look at some sentences and phrases that you can use in your own writing to do that. Now, I want to be very, very clear that in writing analysis, often it isn't about having the most fancy words. It's about explaining things clearly. So sometimes your writing might seem a little bit simplistic, but actually the ideas you're explaining are quite complex. So these are some of the phrases that you can use. The writer uses for spot it. A quote would be a line from the text and using inverted commas. Effect. This creates a sense of, or this creates a feeling of, or this has got a negative or positive mood. Explaining it. The writer wants us to understand. Link it. This links to. Symbolize. This symbolizes. Now, if you look at those sentences and phrases, they're not fantastic or complex, but they're about explaining that skill in your reading. Now, this video will stay on our YouTube channel, and it's there for you to revise and to remember and make sure that you know what SQEELS is. And we'll be using SQEELS again and again and again in English, and we want to make sure that you've got that idea. And remember, SQEELS is about the skills and your reading skills for when talking about texts.